All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, I really hate talking about impeachment here on the show. AOC actually summed up my thoughts exactly last month when she said, quote, "I'm over it," and she characterized impeachment as boring. Yesterday, however, the mask slipped during the hearings when the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, testified before Congress that he was, quote, alarmed that Trump would make the extraordinary step of trying to leverage military assistance. Let's take a listen.
It's one thing to try to leverage a meeting in the White House. It's another thing, I thought, to leverage security assistance to a country at war, dependent on both the security assistance and the demonstration of support. It was much more alarming.
This, of course, is what the entire impeachment scandal is really all about. Donald Trump made the fatal error of almost messing with military aid to Ukraine, which members of the NSC, the establishment Republican Party, and his own ambassador all decided were so important that it must be protected at all costs. In short, it is a foreign policy disagreement by members of the State Department, the intelligence community, and others with the duly elected President of the United States. Journalist Chris Hedges laid this out particularly well on our show yesterday. Let's take a listen to that.
What he did was target another section of the ruling elite, in particular Joe Biden, who the Democratic donor class are trying to anoint as the next Democratic nominee for president. So this is exactly what happened. If you go back to Nixon's impeachment, all of the things that Nixon did, break-ins and the dirty tricks, and had long been carried out by the Nixon White House against anti-war activists, including breaking into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office. But as soon as the Nixon White House carried this out against the Democratic hierarchy by breaking into the headquarters in the Watergate, the Democratic Party headquarters in the Watergate, then it became an impeachable offense.
The truth is that military aid to Ukraine is not sacrosanct whatsoever. That was aid President Obama refused to provide because he thought it would be unnecessarily provoke the Russian government into inflammatory action at the time. As Aaron Mate from The Nation pointed out, quote, "The very fact that Ukraine Gate now has Democrats advocating a policy that Obama rejected should be enough to spark a consideration of whether briefly not arming Ukraine is really the issue on which to pin removing a president from office." The obvious counter to that, of course, is that Trump's actions had more to do with his personal interest in investigating corruption in Ukraine, not with the underlying policy. But as Mate notes during that Twitter exchange, and as Hedges said earlier, the underlying policy and its merits have everything to do with impeachment. As he said, the policy impacts the merits of the all-consuming impeachment scandal, its consequences, and it colors witness testimony. Further, there's a reason that Trump isn't impeached for canceling Palestinian aid or Central American aid. Mate could not have said that better. This has been a political canard since the day that Donald Trump entered the Oval Office. And it is incredibly telling that they decide to impeach him for touching military aid to Ukraine, which best represents a policy item that the entire D.C. establishment and deep state has decided cannot be messed with. Consider that the whistleblower himself is a member of the CIA, that the central witnesses in this inquiry are all within the bureaucracy and took outrageous steps to circumvent the President of the United States, but because they were so concerned about making sure that aid to Ukraine continued to flow. These people do not set U.S. foreign policy. The President does. We are in a situation now where they are openly trying to circumvent democratic norms. That is why other liberals even, like Glenn Greenwald, Aaron, Michael Tracy, and others are speaking up on this issue. But that's just on the merits. Particularly politically, this is an incredibly stupid move. Polling-wise, 49% of the electorate support impeaching Trump, about 45% say they don't. That is what we call approximately the popular vote from the 2016 presidential election. Even better, CBS News polling indicates 73% of the country has already made up their mind when it comes to the matter. That is before the public hearings have begun, because it's a political question through and through. Through that framework, that is an abject disaster for the Democrats. The United States Senate is not going to convict Donald Trump in a trial. Worse for Democrats, the Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Richard Burr has said that the trial will last 6 to 8 weeks, and they're required by the rules to hold it 6 days a week. The vote in the House won't come till Christmas. So guess what? Every U.S. senator who's running for president is going to be holed up here in Washington 6 days a week during the most critical point in the 2020 presidential primary process. Iowa begins voting on February 3rd. New Hampshire, February 11th. You don't think Mitch McConnell and the others are going to make damn sure that Warren, Bernie, Kamala, and others won't be sitting here in D.C. when they'd be most well served in Iowa and New Hampshire? They wouldn't even be missing those primaries for anything, since it's not going to result in a conviction. The long game of this plays out one way. Donald Trump is going to walk free after once again being targeted by unelected bureaucrats within our intelligence community. And I think, Crystal, adopting your framework on this, which is like, I know you don't like Trump, you would rather see him go, but it's the most telling thing that, okay, let's say that's what it is. This is a policy disagreement. So to impeach the president on a policy disagreement and not all of the policy disagreements, which the 48% of Americans want to see him removed for, and to focus it all on military aid to Ukraine is the stupidest move that you could politically make, because this is all about power. We were talking about this earlier. You were talking about how they don't have any moral authority. There's no moral authority within the Democratic Party to talk about soft corruption, because it's endemic to Washington. And so if we're just talking about which party gets to rule over the scraps which the upper class throw to our politicians, then it's all going to come down to who would I rather see taking those scraps.
I mean, I actually disagree that this is sort of like a legitimate foreign policy objective, right, to trade military aid for investigation into your political opponent. Let me put that out there. But as I've said from the beginning, as a strategic political perspective, if you think that the hill that we should die on is that his corruption is illegal and our soft corruption is fine, this is going to be a disaster. Now, one thing that I've been thinking about is, look, Pelosi, whatever you think of her, she's not a stupid person. She knew how this was all going to play out, including that it would go to the Senate and require Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in particular to be stuck in D.C. for weeks at a time, unable to campaign. Look, there's no secret that she does not support progressive priorities like the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. So I don't think that she sees that as a bad thing, that they're stuck here while, Mayor Pete and Joe Biden and now Deval Patrick can go out there and campaign on their centrist, let's just go back to the way things are norms. I'm not sure that she sees that as a downside, even though for, progressives and really for the country, it's obviously a disaster.
Yeah, and here's what I mean when I say it's a foreign policy disagreement. I'm not saying it was a legitimate foreign policy objective on the part of the Trump administration. I'm saying that what concerned these guys so much was the fact that this aid would not be going to Ukraine, or it would even be touched in the first place. They look at aid to Ukraine, which is an entirely hawkish thing. Look, these are Javelin missiles and other deadly weapons that are going to the Ukrainian military, which is basically in a semi-gray war with the Russian government. And the United States is funding something like this. That's a big policy decision here.
Yes.
And that is something that all of Washington decided long, long ago, since the Crimean Peninsula annexation. That was the most effective way in order to deal with the Russian government. And if he, for whatever reason, decided to touch that, that is when you must go. That is what I mean.
Here's all that you need to know. George W. Bush lied us into war, the cost of hundreds of thousands of lives and many, many dollars, and destabilized the entire Middle East, the consequences of which we are still dealing with to this day. Look at Syria, look at ISIS, look at migration, all of that. And we didn't impeach him for that. Why? Because there was a bipartisan consensus around the military-industrial complex. So that was excused, but this is impeachable. That's all you need to know.
Exactly.
All right, My Radar will be next.